Birdcage is a movie about 22-year-old Oscar who goes from living with his restrictive parents to finding a community that live in the woods, and they have one rule: no judgment. I first came up with this story about a year and a half ago when I was not feeling great about myself. I was comparing myself a lot to a lot of other films and filmmakers and finding that my own work was not great and that I lacked value and that there was something wrong about me, something not quite right about me. And one night I sat down with all of those negative emotions and I meditated, and I connected to some old childhood memories, some very negative feelings, and I was overwhelmed, and I cried for about an hour long, and at the end of that I felt amazing. I had this feeling inside of me that everything that I needed to be, I already was, and there was nothing else that I needed. It was already inside of me. I felt completely comfortable in my own skin, and that feeling for me was so profound and so energizing and enlivening that I knew I wanted to create a story where that feeling would exist all of the time. It wouldn't just be a beautiful cathartic moment or a moment which is one of the best moments in our lives. It would be there all of the time. So I decided a community that lives with no judgment would mean that no one is made to feel that something is wrong about themselves. So they would go about their day with no doubts in their mind, no thought that anyone is going to tell them they're bad, and not have that running mill of different negative thoughts telling ourselves that there's something wrong with us and there's something we need to change. To just be completely comfortable with the way you are now, all of the time. And that's what the community of Birdcage is all about. Obviously, I knew that with this kind of a phenomenon, people would naturally think, this can't work, you know, this is either a fairy tale or it's going to go really wrong. And I didn't want that. I wanted something real. So instead of going against that human nature, that tendency, I played with it. The film has both of those sides to it. It has the fairy tale, beautiful, heartwarming, light-hearted side to it, and then it has extreme darkness as the film goes on. And for me, it's important because I want to leave people with that possibility, just like the community, that they can feel this way all of the time. But in order to do that, they need to go on a roller coaster of different emotions, feel the euphoria, the love that Oscar feels as he goes through this beautiful journey in this community, but then also see the darkness and see how fucked up it is, and to feel like there's something wrong with this community and there's something bad about this community, and to root for Oscar to do the right thing until the very end of the film, where a real possibility is left with the audience. The main characters in the film are Oscar, Charlie, Emily, Derek. These are the main four characters in the film. So Oscar is a 22-year-old from a restricted background who's lived a life of feeling trapped and not being able to pursue the things that he loves in life because of primarily his parents. He has a great moral code because of his parents as well. It's the one good thing that he's taken from his parents. He has a love for crafting figurines, which he's really good at. He makes these little wooden figurines out of sticks, but his parents don't appreciate that. They think he should focus on his placement that he has, his job. He's someone that is in a sense a sucker for love in the nicest way possible, because he hasn't been shown love for who he truly is. So it's uncommon for him to, you know, to big himself up or to give himself props. He's in a sense someone that you could look at and feel sorry for and think, come on, like, you're better than you think you are. Charlie, he is a emotional genius. He is someone that has created a community to give everyone the inner happiness that he's experienced as a child, that not everyone he knew had, and he's come up with this community with one rule: no judgment. He has a very strong emotional sense where he can tell exactly what someone's feeling or thinking and accordingly react to that. He cares a lot about his one rule. This is everything he's built, this community. So if anyone breaks the rule of no judgment, that is the ultimate betrayal to Charlie. And in that sense, he's very fragile and childlike. On the lighter side, he's an eccentric guy. He's very fun. He's always thinking of the next best prank. He's quite clever and crafty in that sense. But at the end of the day, he really cares for everyone in this camp, and he gives them all of the love that he possibly can whenever they're talking to him about their stories or anything they want to talk about. Emily is the leading lady in the film. She is the polar opposite of Oscar. Oscar, who gets very embarrassed in sexual and intimate situations. Emily's very forward. She's very flirtatious, and she's very comfortable about her the use of sex, not having sex but talking about sex and sexual references. She's very comfortable with that. She uses it to her advantage sometimes to mess with people. She's a bit of a prankster. She's a bit fun in that sense that she likes to wind people up. She also has quite the ego. She thinks that she's hot stuff, and I'm sure some people would agree. But when someone doesn't give her attention, that gets to her because she's not used to that, and she's she seeks that subconsciously, and consciously she wants something more meaningful too, because she's smart. Emily is smart, and she has a good brain. She has a lot of common sense, and even though on first glance it doesn't seem that way, she is smart and she can hold a good conversation. She's also very critical and honest in that sense. She can get jealous. She's not usually threatened by the other girls, but when she gets jealous, she gets really jealous. But one thing above all is she cares so much about this camp, and she will live by this rule no matter what. This rule and just everything this camp stands for means so much to her. Derek is a borderline maniac. He has got something off with him. He's like, if you see someone down the road who is a drug addict and they're unpredictable and they're moving funny and they're moving strange and you're not sure what they're going to do next, you're not sure if they're going to come over to you and attack you or hit you, and you feel nervous just around them, you know, that walk past them is the most nervous walk in your life, because you don't know what they're going to do and they're unpredictable. And he hates authority. He is very fond of fires and creating fires, and this is a big part of the film, his love for fires and what he tries to do with them. And he has some very radical mindsets about humanity and what humans deserve and what the fire means to him. There's a few main audiences for this film. The very obvious one, which I think is one that has been underrepresented but also underexplored, surprisingly enough, in film, is young adults from ethnic families, especially in the UK or America, you know, first world countries, English speaking countries, that have families that are very restrictive of them and have watched them all of their lives and held them back. I can't personally find that many movies like that. Some of the dancing movies, Footloose, these kind of movies, I mean, Harry Potter, it wasn't an ethnic family, but they were very strict on him. In this case with Birdcage, it's a film where his family are very controlling of him, and he's not been able to find himself because of the way his family have boxed him into a certain way of thinking. It's quite unique to the average ethnic family, but I think it resonates a lot with someone from that background, whether that be a child who's been brought up in that similar situation, or parents who have treated their kids that way, or who have affected their kids' growth in that way, and they are and they know that, and they almost feel bad for how they've stifled their children. So I think there's a big audience there with a lot of ethnic minority groups in the UK especially. The other group which I think this hits is counterculture groups. It's clear that this is a community that thinks differently, it thinks outside of the mainstream, it has rules which go against normal humanity. You know, it has a flawed sense of morality, but in return it has no judgment and love for everyone in the community. And what that means is people who are radical thinkers, or people from certain movements such as the Extinction Rebellion, or very counterculture movements, will resonate strongly with this film, because the way that the characters think, especially the character who created the camp, Charlie, is very aligned with their belief system. However, I think it also applies to a lot of people who are trying to live a different way, people who are trying to break out of the mainstream or social conditioning, which is a lot of young adults at the moment. I think we're all looking for ways to get away from our programming, quote unquote, and this is exactly what Charlie has done. He's created a community in this film, in this story, the Birdcage community, where they can be exactly who they want to be without anyone telling them that they can't be that, without anyone shaming them or making them wrong. And that's why I think it appeals universally to a lot of young adults. Therefore, there's a huge audience for this film. The unique idea of no judgment, of it being a society, as we've seen in lots of films and series, a society which is away from the mainstream, doing exactly what they want to do, living in their own specific way with their lack of rules or small amount of rules, aka just one rule here, no judgment. It's something that gets people's attention. However, it has this emotional grounding of the rule being no judgment. It's not just you can do whatever the hell you want and cause chaos. It's a loving rule. It's a rule that comes from a place of love and acceptance. The film is, at the beginning, a very light drama. It has comedic elements. It's got the children who are called the younglings in the story, who are a big part of it, and it's very light-hearted, very fun, funny, and heartwarming, and it really touching in that sense of seeing this guy who's come from this restricted background and is thriving, and people are showing him love, and he's seeing these children running around that have the childhood that he didn't have, and he loves that, and it's amazing for him. It's a whole new phenomenon. And as the film proceeds, compared to, for example, films like Midsommar or The Beach, for example, these kind of films, The Village, community films where there's a clear build of something's going to happen, this film starts in a different way, and that's why it's unique in a sense, because it starts light-hearted, and as it goes on, it then becomes very dark. Because just from logic, you know, a community that has no rules could go really south, and we see, you know, very few hints, but it doesn't build up to it, and it's only about 45 minutes into the film where one of the most darkest things imaginable takes place, and that for an audience is something that, having been watching a heartwarming story, it throws them right in at the deep end, and it doesn't gear them up for it, so it's a huge shock to the emotions. So the film goes from being a very light-hearted drama, which you could compare to films like The Internship or some Adam Sandler movies, or, you know, maybe some other more drama-like films, not just comedies. And then it goes dark. Then you're at the level of really dark drama films, more like the Nightingale, Midsommar, Hereditary, films that have been doing really well for their darkness recently, and those are horror films, you know, a lot of those films. So this isn't a horror film, but some of the darkness we see and some of the messed up things we see in this community, and the guilt trip we go on with Oscar as we see how much this is affecting him, how messed up this is all to him, and how he's in a place which goes against all of his morals and everything he stands for. We get into a very deep and dark drama towards the end, and a very tragic ending, but a hopeful ending too. So, what do I want from this film? I think I want this film to be a film that's going to connect with audiences on a very deep level. I want this universal message of no judgment to transcend, but I also want the scenes to be perfected, engaging, emotional, and to affect audiences, especially live, and also after the live release, wherever it goes, on streaming platforms, online, wherever the film will be seen. I want it to deeply affect people and be a film that, while they're watching it, is a transcending experience emotionally. I want to perfect the film from a filmmaking perspective. The film for me is somewhere in between an indie film and a blockbuster because there's huge scenes. It doesn't shy away from big effects at times, but it's a very actor-based, character-based film that is all about the psychology in the characters and how a community like this could operate in a place that has this one rule and is very strict in its approach, while also the complete most relaxed, loving, silly place in the world. So for me, it's one of those films that it needs to be perfected from a filmmaking perspective, because the visuals, the poetry, the shots, for it all to add together, it needs to feel almost like a blockbuster in that sense. The way it's shot, it's not shot just, one shot every 10 seconds. It's shot with a lot of different shots, and it's because it's all about the characters. You need to see their personalities, you need to see their faces, you need to get a bit of all of them. You can't just have these big wide shots where all of the characters are there and they're talking and you're just watching in. You need to be in there with them. The camera is inside with the characters, as if you're in there with the camp. But also from the acting perspective, some of the performances that are needed to be given in this film, the main character Oscar, he goes from someone who's quite suppressed and trapped to someone who is euphoric and finding himself and feeling so loved, more than he's ever been in his life, to a point where everything is, all of that is in complete opposition with the other feeling that he's feeling right now, which is guilt, and that something that goes against everything he stands for. So he goes from a rise to a huge fall, and come the end, some of the things that this guy has seen is ridiculous. It's one of the most tragic character journeys in any film, but also one of the most meaningful. So it's, in that sense, I've lost track of what I was saying. In that sense, it's the acting, the performances are going to be huge for this film, and without strong performances, this film is not going to work. Even Charlie is a very unique character, a very eccentric character, and Emily, and they need to have very strong presence, and especially Charlie, empathy to an extreme level that hasn't been seen before. These characters, they have to act in a way that is almost beyond what human emotion is capable of, because they are so pure, they are so accepting, and there's no one giving them any doubts in their mind that when they experience emotion, they experience it big. The only emotion that they don't experience is guilt, because they are conditioned to not feel that way, to turn a blind eye, and to never judge anything going on. So from an acting perspective, it's a very tricky one, and it needs to be done well, it needs to be casted well, and it needs the right performers for it to transcend in that way. Apart from that, I just want the film to eventually give people that feeling where they're sat in that seat in the cinema and they're feeling that this community, it has something special, and they're connecting to it, and they're feeling that the comfort that those characters have in themselves, how comfortable they are, how happy they are in their own skin. The audience, it's diffusing off into the audience. And on top of that, come the end of the film, after going through hopefully a very emotional catharsis of varying different emotions, they will be left with something that is a possibility. This film's not a fairy tale. This film's it's not horror either. But they've seen everything. They've seen the fairy tale. They've seen the beauty. They've seen the euphoria. They've seen the guilt. They've seen the darkness. They've seen the tragedy. And now now that we've got them, now that we've engaged them emotionally on all cylinders, now they can see the possibility for a place where they can feel this way. And even if it's just a slight thought, a slight plant of the subconscious, this film will give audiences something that is so powerful, that is connecting them back to something that they've only felt a few times in their life, and the times that they felt it have been some of the best moments of their life, and it's giving them that as a possibility for more than just one moment at a time, as a permanent healing, to feel that way, to feel great in their own skin all of the time.